Welcome to today's ghost story. The building remembers you. I didn't bring anything back with me, at least that's what I told myself. I've repeated that line so many times it's practically a mantra now, but some nights when I'm lying awake, listening to the groan of the pipes or the soft creak of floorboards I know shouldn't be moving, I start to wonder. It was supposed to be a simple job. Draper's house, a neglected apartment block from the early 1900s, was slated for renovation. My firm was hired to document its current structure before the work began. Nothing special. Old buildings usually carry a bit of personality, but this one felt different the moment I stepped through the front door. The air was stale, but not in the way of a forgotten building. It felt occupied, heavy, like someone had just been there, just stepped out of sight. The kind of thick silence that settles after a conversation ends mid-sentence. I was alone, or at least I should have been. No power, no staff. Just me, a torch, my camera, and a stack of outdated floor plans. At first, it was routine, notes, photos, sketches. But then the discrepancies started. Rooms that stretched further than they should have. Hallways that weren't on the blueprints. A stairwell I descended once, cold stone steps leading down into a basement that didn't exist on paper, was gone the next day. Bricked over like it had never been there at all. I told myself it was stress, fatigue. Old buildings shift and sag, perceptions warp. But I couldn't explain the way the air changed, how it seemed to thicken the deeper I went inside, how I'd round a corner and feel certain I was being watched, or how every photo I took looked subtly wrong. Slight warps in perspective. A door where there hadn't been one. A figure, small, blurred, at the far end of a hall I'd sworn was empty. I deleted that photo. The dreams started after day 3. Always the same. I'd find myself back. Inside Draper's house, walking corridors that twisted too far, too sharp. Doors creaking open as I passed, each revealing just enough darkness to stir something inside me. Dread or curiosity? Sometimes both. One room in particular always drew me in. A tall, narrow space with heavy curtains and a full-length mirror leaning against the wall. In the dream, I'd step inside and see myself in that mirror. But it wasn't me exactly. Something in the eyes was wrong, hollow, off, and always, behind the reflection, there was a figure, a smear of darkness, watching. I left after a week, work complete, documentation submitted. I told no one what I'd seen. I wanted to believe it was over. That once I stepped out of that building, I left it behind. But the smell followed me home. That faint, musty scent of velvet and rot. The dreams didn't stop either. If anything, they became more vivid, more insistent, and then the other things started. The subtle changes in my apartment, the creaks at night, in the exact rhythm I'd heard in Harrington Place. Cold spots that would vanish the moment I turned to look. I started catching glimpses of movement in mirrors, always just at the edge of the reflection. Gone when I looked directly. The worst night was when I found myself standing by the front door, keys in hand, no memory of getting out of bed, just standing there, ready to leave, ready to go back. I don't remember unlocking the door. I only remember the air, still and waiting, and a single thought, clear as day. It remembers me. It knows my name, my face, my smell. Whatever was in that building, it marked me. And now it's here. It never really let me leave, so if you ever pass by Harrington Place, keep walking. Don't look up at the windows, don't listen if you hear something whisper your name. And whatever you do, don't go inside, because once it knows you, it doesn't forget. Next story, is it a skinwalker or something else? I have lived in Alaska for half my life, and my parents had built a house in the depths of the forest, but we still had some neighbors. I know these woods like the back of my hand, and I always played in them as well. One day I was walking my dog, Bao, who is a Rottweiler, and is very brave and never cowers away from anything. We were walking around the trail in the woods when we saw a child. He looked like he was around 8 years old, but he was oddly tall and had long arms and legs. I thought that we was just tall for his age and walked up him, but Bao stopped suddenly and was growling. He never growls unless someone or something is dangerous. I calmed Bao down and walked up to the child and asked him, "Hey, you seem lost. Do you need a way back home? I know these trails." Nothing. The boy said nothing, and just stared at me. I noticed how his eyes were dilated, and there were blue veins pumping out of his skin. I assumed that he has a condition, so I didn't look into it. But now I wished I did. I kept talking to him, but he said nothing and just stared at me. Then I gave up and walked away. That night I had asked my neighbors if they had seen the boy, but they didn't. When I walked into my room, I suddenly felt watched, so I looked out my window, and what I saw was concerning and horrifying. Outside was standing the same boy, but he looked taller, more disorientated and less human. Honestly, I couldn't stop watching. Him! I froze as the boy walked closer in the light and I saw his features. He looked like he got skinned alive and had pitch-black eyes. Suddenly he opened his mouth and talked. He sounded like a little boy, but with a demonic edge to it. "Come outside, Keela. I want to play with you." 10, he grinned so wide it looked like his skin on his mouth had ripped apart. I closed my window and ran downstairs, tears streaming down, and I sobbed to my mum. I somehow told my mum what happened, but she insisted on telling me that it was my imagination. Suspiciously enough, she had gotten a brush made out of peacock feathers and blessed me. For more context on that, the brush is used in the Hindu religion, and it helps ward off any bad spirits. I went to sleep after, but I still felt watched. Few weeks after that incident, nothing strange had happened, but I still had my guard up. I was walking in the same trail with my best friend Julia. We walked for another mile, then Julia suddenly got quiet and I asked her, "You good, Julie?" I turned around to look at her and see her looking to her left, out in the woods. Keela, why is there a nude man staring at us?" I looked where she was, looking at and saw the same thing that had appeared and talked to me outside my room. I grabbed Julia and booked it out of there. I have never ran as fast as I did. When I looked back, the thing was just standing there with that same menacing grin. We made it back to my home, and Julia left the second we got inside. I told my parents and convinced them to move out of there. Honestly, I still have nightmares from that day and I still feel watched. One warning before buying a house in Alaska near the forest: never assume anything is safe and always keep a gun or pepper spray with you. I genuinely don't know what would have happened if I hadn't ran from there as soon as I saw that thing. Next story, the Black Wolf. That day had started out as nothing more than a simple outing. Me and a small group of friends had decided to spend the afternoon at a lake in Montana. It was one of those places with a long wooden dock stretching out over the water, and I remember how calm and still everything felt when we arrived. The sun was high, the lake's surface mirrored the sky, and the surrounding trees created a green wall around the shore. We had a good time, laughing, taking turns jumping off the dock, and just relaxing by the water. None of us could have imagined that later that evening something would happen that I still can't explain. As the day went on, the sun dipped lower, and the temperature began to drop. Montana evenings can get surprisingly cool, and shadows started creeping over the lake. We packed up our things, towels, coolers, whatever we'd brought, and made our way back to the car. It was getting dark quickly, so we didn't linger. We piled into the car, all of us tired, still damp from swimming, and ready to head home. The drive started off normal enough. The road we took was a 2-lane highway with heavy forest on both sides. It was late at night, completely dark except for our headlights. There were no other cars in sight. The kind of road where, if you break down, you know it's going to be a long wait before anyone else comes along. It was along this stretch of road that I saw something I've never been able to forget. Out of the corner of my eye on the edge of the tree line, something was watching us. At first, it was just 2 red dots, like eyes, shining back at me from the woods. I stared at them thinking it was probably just the reflection of our headlights off an animal's eyes, maybe a deer or a raccoon. But something about them felt wrong. They weren't the right height or the right spacing, and the glow seemed more intense than normal animal eye shine. I kept looking, trying to convince myself it was nothing unusual. But as the car moved on, I realized the eyes were moving too. When I turned around to look out the back window, I saw the shape of a creature coming out of the darkness. Something wolf-like, but much larger than any wolf I've ever seen. Its body was hard to make out because of how dark it was, but it had a distinct, powerful silhouette and it was keeping up with us. We were going somewhere between 35 and 40 miles an hour, and yet this thing was running just behind the car, never falling too far back.
I felt my stomach drop.
I pointed it out to one of my friends sitting beside me. They turned to look and their expression changed instantly. They saw it too. They leaned over and told the person next to them. Soon 3 of us were looking back, all of us seeing the same thing. We told the driver, our friend behind the wheel, to speed up. But the driver couldn't see anything in the rearview mirror and thought we were joking or overreacting. They kept driving normally while the rest of us were practically shouting that something was chasing the car. I kept my eyes fixed on the thing, trying to understand what it was. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd lost sight of it in the dark. But there was nothing there anymore. The red eyes were gone. The shape, the movement, all of it had vanished as if it had never been there in the first place. We drove the rest of the way home in tense silence.
No one really knew what to say.
I kept thinking back over it, trying to explain it to myself. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe my eyes were playing games with me. But I know what I saw, and at least 2 of my friends saw it too. It wasn't a deer. It wasn't a coyote. It wasn't anything I've seen before or since. Even now, years later, I still don't have an explanation for what we encountered on that road. All I know is that for a few minutes, a wolf-like creature with glowing red eyes chased our car at high speed through a dark Montana forest. And then it disappeared without a trace. Next story, Encounter with a Demon. When I was a child, my parent remarried and we welcomed a younger sibling into the family. From the very beginning, my sibling's father's family never liked me. I could never quite figure out his father's stance. Sometimes he tried to push my parent to neglect me to satisfy his family, but at other times he quietly backed her up when things got tense. The grandmother, however, was openly hostile. There was something cold and calculating in her eyes. She seemed convinced I would ruin her son's marriage. I've been able to see spirits and other presences since I was very young.
I still can, though I've learned ways to maintain peace of mind.
Once these things know you can see them. They don't always leave you alone. I've always kept it to myself, though, and never discussed it with anyone, not even my parent, unless she pried because of concern. After the remarriage, my parents' partner convinced us to leave our hometown and move closer to his family. We ended up living with the grandparents while waiting for an apartment that never materialized. The house itself was unsettling. It was old and oddly put together, right next to train tracks that shook the windows and floors at all hours of the night. From the outside, it looked like a 2-story house, but inside it was just one, with the backyard sunk into the ground, accessible only by a small flight of stairs. All the windows were at least 11 feet off the ground. The only bathroom was long and narrow, almost hallway-like, and the only way to reach it was through the grandparents' bedroom. Its proportions felt wrong, the ceilings unusually tall, amplifying every creak and groan of the house. From the moment I stepped inside, my stomach twisted. Something was off.
That first night I was terrified.
I chalked it up to a new environment, clutching my bunny plush, the only familiar thing I'd brought with me. I curled up on the ancient couch on the far side of the house. I wasn't allowed to sleep in my parents' room, as demanded by my siblings' family, so I had to sleep in the living room. I had already experienced things that made sleeping alone terrifying, but I was told it was time to cut the cord. I cried silently, clinging to the plush, and tried to sleep. A few hours later, a train rattled the house awake. As I drifted off again, I heard footsteps crossing the kitchen into the living room. Expecting my parent, I turned, but no one was there.
Night after night, the same eerie feeling of being watched would grip me.
During the day, I locked those fears away, pretending everything was normal so I could make it through school. But the sleepless nights left me constantly drained. Other strange things started happening. I would catch glimpses of pale, unknown people standing outside the high windows, their glazed eyes staring in, sometimes pressing hands against the glass. Impossible, since the windows were over 11 feet off the ground. If I turned away and looked back, they'd be gone. At random times throughout the day and night, I'd hear someone softly calling my name from empty rooms, even though no one was there. I learned to pretend it wasn't happening, walking into the room and seeing it vacant, and quietly turning around and walking out, training myself to act as though nothing was wrong just to cope. The bathroom, in particular, became a place of dread. Every time I stepped inside, especially alone, I felt as though something unseen was watching me with a cold, predatory focus that sent my fight or flight into overdrive. Because of that, I trained myself to use the restroom and change into my pajamas before dark, brushing my teeth with my parent as an excuse to be near her so I wouldn't have to face it alone at night. The grandmother's subtle hostility persisted. Small gestures and passive-aggressive acts sent clear messages. I wasn't welcome. She made life harder for me, small acts unnoticed by others but impossible to ignore. My parent defended me fiercely, but the harassment always resumed. The only comfort I had was my bunny plush and the family dog. He was not allowed inside because the grandmother hated animals, but he was gentle and protective, growling at certain windows at night as if warning me where not to look. Strangely, he became ill almost immediately after we moved in and passed within a few months. No animal lasted long in that house. The activity escalated around Halloween. A leftover sensor-activated decoration in the office off the living room would trigger at exactly 3:30 a.m. each night, long after everyone else was asleep. By then, I had started retreating inward as a way to cope. About a year later, my parent and their partner went to an event that was a few hours' drive away. I knew they wouldn't be back until morning, so I asked if I could stay up and watch TV until 11. My parent agreed. I got caught up in a movie and, by the time it ended, realized too late that I hadn't used the bathroom or changed into my pajamas before the sun went down. Heart pounding, I crept through the dim hallway and knocked softly on the grandparents' door to ask permission. I expected a lecture about bothering them, but instead the grandmother opened it without saying a word, gave me a brief look, then turned and went back to bed. The bathroom loomed ahead. Tonight it was pitch black, the usual nightlight gone. The only light switch sat on the far wall beside the toilet, meaning I'd have to cross the room in the dark to reach it. I hesitated at the threshold, trying to summon the courage to run across, but as soon as I stepped one foot inside, my instincts screamed at me to turn back. I spun and bumped straight into the grandmother.
I hadn't heard her get up, hadn't heard a single footstep.
She stood there smiling, and in that instant there was something unmistakably evil in her eyes, a glint that made my stomach twist. Before I could slip past, she asked softly, "Are you afraid?" Confused and already apologizing, I looked down to avoid her gaze and tried to move past her, but suddenly she grabbed me with surprising strength and shoved me into the bathroom. A sharp click overhead told me she'd latched a lock I hadn't even known existed before that night. Mounted at the top on the outside, I stumbled forward in the dark, heart pounding.
I immediately turned and tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I started beating on it and pleading to be let out.
Then I felt eyes on me.
I wasn't alone.
Behind me, from the far corner of the high ceiling, came a low, deep growl, animal-like and menacing. My breath caught as I froze in fear, and something began to crawl down the wall. I could hear the click of its nails on the tile, heavy and deliberate, like a large dog descending from above. It stepped to the floor and moved slowly toward me, the floor groaning with each step. The air chilled. I could feel its breath on the back of my neck before it even reached me. Then huge, rough hands, fingers far too long, closed around my upper arms. The grip was tight enough to leave light bruises. It leaned in, whispering in a deep, guttural voice, growling that I belonged to it now, then chuckled darkly. Everything went black. I think I passed out from sheer fear, hitting a limit I couldn't withstand. I came to on the living room couch, still in the clothes I'd been wearing the day before. The house was dark and silent except for the sound of the front door unlocking, my parent and their partner returning.
My scream tore through the room before I even knew I was awake.
My parent rushed to me, scooping me up, asking what was wrong. The commotion had the house awake and out of their rooms, wondering what was going on. Shaking and sobbing in hysterics, I pointed at the grandmother and tried to force words out about what had happened. When I could make semi-coherent sentences, she acted shocked and concerned, immediately denying everything. In a calm voice, she suggested it must have been another one of my nightmares. When my parents' eyes were turned, she smirked at me. When the sun rose the next morning, I was still asleep in my parents' bed. After I had woken up screaming the night before, she spent an hour calming me, reassuring me I was safe, tucked me into her bed, and held me until I fell asleep. In the morning light, she saw the bruises on my arms, and her anger was volcanic. From that moment on, she refused to leave me alone with that side of the family. She reshuffled her entire schedule so she could be home with me, or made sure the one relative, who had always treated me kindly, was the one to pick me up and watch me after school. I begged her not to make me sleep in the living room anymore. Terrified of being alone in the dark, I fought her on it night after night, until she finally made it non-negotiable and defied the demands of the family. She bought a small cot for her bedroom, and, from then on, we resumed our lost nightly ritual of bedtime stories. My parent and I reading to my young sibling. As I learned to read, I would sometimes practice out loud, joining in when I could, turning it into a routine that brought us all comfort. But even with her there, I rarely slept. Almost every night, I found myself standing guard beside my sibling's crib, convinced that the thing from the bathroom might come for him next. Exhaustion bled into my days.
I nodded off in class and my grades began to slip.
Sometimes my parent would wake up to find me still standing watch in the dark, refusing to sleep, and seeing me like that was the last straw. She decided to leave the house and her partner entirely, moving us back home to protect both of us. I still carry pieces of that night. I still struggle with nighttime anxiety and have learned to ignore spirits.
I've never returned to that house, but nightmares of that thing in the bathroom, of it threatening my family and trying to claim me, still haunt me.
I sometimes wonder if I really saw these things as a child and young adult. Years ago, my therapist told me something that helped, and I hope it helps others who can see the invisible. Even if it wasn't real, it felt real to you, and it still caused real trauma.
There's nothing wrong with you. Even now, I still see and sense things other people can't, though not as often now.
Long before the night in that bathroom, I had already experienced terrifying encounters, like the thing that would tap on my window at night, watching me with piercing eyes that made sleeping alone nearly impossible. Those earlier experiences primed me for fear and hypervigilance, but that night cemented the trauma. In the years that followed, the strange and unexplainable never fully went away. I continued to see and feel things I couldn't explain. I built strict rules to cope. Never use the restroom in the dark, always keep a light on, always know my exits. Until I was 23, I couldn't sleep alone without some form of light glowing nearby. Many nights I lay rigid and sleepless, heart pounding, gripped by a crushing sense of dread, and utterly convinced something was lurking in the dark, waiting for me to drift off. Only when the first rays of sunlight reached my room would my body finally release its tension, exhaustion, dragging me into a shallow sleep. Now I can sleep in the dark alone. It took years to reach this point, but I've learned how to calm my body enough to rest through the night. The experiences haven't stopped entirely, but I now have ways to protect myself and make my home a safe space. Next story. True Home. Invasion in Autumn. This story takes place in a remote area of the UK, but to protect the people involved, I won't say the exact location. My friend Zara, a British Pakistani influencer, had just recently had her second child, and her husband had gone away on a golf holiday, leaving her alone with the 2 children. She was used to being left alone, as her husband often worked away from home too and would often go away on vacation with his friends, leaving her alone to take care of the children. It was a stormy October night and there was a lot of thunder, so it was noisy. She started to feel uncomfortable as it was getting dark early, and her house is fairly isolated, so all the noise from outside was getting to her. At around 9 p.m, she had just finished a cup of coffee in the kitchen. The children were asleep and Zara was making sure the house was locked up for the night. She went back into the kitchen and saw that the back door was slightly open. She started to approach it, but then felt very dizzy, stumbling, and she fainted. Zara slowly regained consciousness and was sat on a chair in the kitchen. The first thing she was aware of was how heavily she was breathing through her nose. She felt something covering her mouth, and after twisting her lips, she realized it was sticky tape that was sealing her lips. Zara started to panic and tried to talk and shout, but the gag around her mouth was preventing this. She struggled to move as well as she could feel. Her hands were taped together behind the chair, and when she looked down, she was duct taped to the chair, and her feet were taped together. Her hard breathing popped the duct tape covering her mouth in and out. Then the lamp over her head switched on. Standing there before her was a medium-built man with a hood on and a scarf covering his lower face. At this point, Zara was obviously petrified and was mainly concerned for her 2 children sleeping upstairs. The man then said, "I won't hurt you, but do you keep money in the house?" Zara mumbled no against the tape. The man had a large bag which he had filled with items such as Dubai jewelry from around the house. The next thing he said sent a chill up Zara's back. "Don't worry, your kids are still asleep." He then went to leave through the back kitchen door, and before exiting turned and said, "I'm sorry for this." He then left. Zara struggled with her bonds for a few minutes, and then eventually freed her mouth from the tape by twisting her mouth and biting the tape. She immediately ran to check on her children, who had both slept through the entire ordeal. She phoned the police and the man was eventually apprehended later that week. As mentioned, Zara has an online presence, so the man was aware of this and was aware that she was often left alone. He admitted to gaining entry to the back door and drugged her coffee, which explains why she fainted. The burglar said he had lost his business
and was in a desperate situation with the state of the economy, but he
did not wish to harm anyone. Zara bears a resemblance to Kim Kardashian, and the fact she is a micro-influencer is likely what gave him this idea, as a similar situation happened with Kim Kardashian a few years earlier. Zara is a very strong feisty young woman. So she did eventually learn to live with the situation. However, it's not something you can ever fully recover from. She couldn't help feel sorry for the man who did this, but the feeling she had when she was in that position is something she'll never forget. Next story. The Hallowed City Patrol. Ask anyone what police do, and you'll hear the same answers. Write reports, make arrests, clean up after the fact. But the truth is, sometimes we deal in nightmares. The Academy can teach you how to disarm a suspect, how to read a crime scene, how to hold the line when chaos erupts, but nothing prepares you for the nights when the threat isn't human. Some dangers don't bleed, don't breathe, and don't belong in this world at all. And when they come, we're the ones who have to face them. No training manual warns you about what waits in the fog, what slips silently through locked doors, or what lingers just beyond the light. It was late October, the kind of evening that carried the scent of wood smoke and the hush of early twilight. Halloween was just days away, and the air had turned crisp, cool enough to fog your breath, urging hands into pockets and making you walk a little quicker. Just after 9 p.m., I rolled down Main Street. The town had awakened in its annual ritual, drawing tourists from around the world. Brick sidewalks, narrow and uneven from generations of footsteps, wore the season with quiet pride. Hay bales leaned against wrought iron fences, and scarecrows in flannel shirts and patched jeans stood stiffly near doorways, their heads tilted just enough to suggest a wary attention. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered along storefronts and window ledges, their carved grins warped in the candlelight. Tiny flames threw restless shadows across brick facades and weathered wooden signs, twisting the familiar into something strange. Above it all, half-bare trees clung stubbornly to their last bursts of color, deep crimson, burnished gold, and the warm orange of cider in sunlight. Through their branches, strings of orange and purple lights wound steadily, glowing soft and warm like lanterns guiding wanderers through these centuries-old streets. Yet the festive glow of the lights brought no real comfort. I told myself it was only nerves, or maybe the restless energy of the streets overflowing with people drawn to the town's centuries-old seasonal celebration. But beneath it all, something pressed in on me, quiet and wrong. And that's when I noticed the fog. The night had cooled faster than the day allowed, and with it came fog rolling off the harbour and creeping through alleyways. It pooled in corners of the cobblestone streets, spilling across intersections in ghost-like sheets. I kept one eye on the fog as it thickened, noting how quickly visibility was dropping. The world beyond my headlights was fading, swallowed block by block. That's when dispatch broke in, and the real weight of the night began. All available units. Priority 1. Missing child. 7-year-old girl named Emily. Last seen in her bedroom around 8:02 p.m. Reported missing by 9:05 p.m. No broken windows. No signs of forced entry. Front door found slightly open. Parents say it was locked. I keyed up my radio and notified dispatch I was en route. I was already nearby, patrolling the oldest part of town, where narrow streets pressed between worn brick and colonial houses that leaned with quiet dignity. Their centuries-old frames bore the weight of generations, whispering stories in creaks and shadows. Brick chimneys jutted at odd angles, remnants of winters no one remembered. Tall, narrow windows, framed in wooden shutters, caught the glow of lamplight in fractured glints, like eyes half closed in thought. Clapboard siding stretched across steeply pitched roofs in muted shades of white, grey, and faded blue, each home wearing its age like armor. Above, flickering streetlights cast pale pools across the pavement, stretching shadows along the facades. Their glow spilled over stoops and gardens dressed for Halloween, polished pumpkins, trembling cobwebs, and stiff tombstones arranged like sentries. Beneath the festive veneer, the streets felt alive with unseen eyes. And then I saw her. A little girl, blonde, barefoot. She wore a pale blue flannel nightgown, damp with dew. Her skin was like unpainted porcelain, white, cold, brittle. She moved slowly along the edge of the road, and the fog twisted around her with each step, curling and drifting as if it had a life of its own. She seemed almost suspended between the world of light and shadow.
Fragile and unreal, yet undeniably there. But her right arm was lifted.
Elbow bent, fingers curled as if entwined with someone's hand. I strained my eyes, searching the shadows beside her, but the space was empty. I radioed dispatch that I had a visual on the child and pulled over. I stepped out slowly. The night pressed in around me, thick, damp, and quiet. My footsteps seemed unnaturally loud on the pavement. Each breath drew in cold, heavy air, fog curling through my lungs. Time stretched, movements sluggish, like wading through a current I couldn't see. I shook it off, just enough to find my voice. "Emily,"
I said gently. "I'm a police officer."
"Your parents sent me. They're worried about you." She didn't react. She just stopped mid-step, didn't turn, just froze, like a puppet whose strings had gone slack. Then she rotated toward me, her head unmoving.
Not quick, not cautious.
Just a slow, mechanical pivot, her gaze fixed straight ahead, like a security camera scanning a room. Her eyes were wide, blue but glassy, unfocused. Her lips hung slightly apart, as if she'd been interrupted mid-thought. Every movement felt hollow, distant, like she was only partially tethered to the world around her. No recognition. "Just emptiness, Emily," I said again. That's when she smiled. And it was wrong. Not just too big, but practiced. Like she'd watched someone else do it and was trying to get it right. "Hello, Mr. Policeman." Her voice sounded oddly delicate, like she was repeating words told to her by someone else. I knelt down to her level. The dirt beneath my knee was cold and damp. I kept my flashlight low, careful not to blind her. "Emily, it's time to go home now. Your mom and dad are waiting for you." She looked past me, not through me, past me. Her eyes focused on something just over my right shoulder. My spine locked up. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. "I'm going with Mr. Big Hat," she whispered. The words were so soft I almost missed them. But again, her voice was wrong. Each syllable slid out measured, deliberate.
Unnaturally spaced, as if something unseen was speaking through her. Behind her,
Tires rolled slowly over asphalt. A second cruiser, headlights off, glided up from the far end of the street. It was 9:14.
Officer Olson. He stepped out and approached carefully, one hand near his belt line.
His eyes swept the empty yards and dark windows. I turned back to Emily. "Who's Mr. Big Hat?" She didn't answer at first, glancing above her right hand as if seeking permission to speak. Her smile faltered. She lowered her gaze, then darted it back to that same spot beside me. "He came into my room," she quickly whispered. "He asked real nice." Then her arms snapped forward, one sharp, twitching motion, like an invisible hand had yanked it. The movement was too sudden, too exact, to be hers. A thin whimper slipped from her throat. That was enough. I didn't need to see any more. I moved quickly, but gently. "It's all right," I said, sliding my hands beneath her stiff arms. "We're going home." She didn't resist, but she didn't help either. She was rigid.
Unnaturally so, I carried her toward my cruiser.
Officer Olson was waiting, saying nothing until I got close. "She all right?"
He asked. "I think so," but I wasn't sure. I buckled her into the back seat.
She stared out the far window, humming softly. A melody with no rhythm.
No shape, just a broken tune. I closed the door gently,
making sure the lock clicked. Then I saw it. In the glass of the cruiser window, just for a heartbeat, a reflection. Towering. A massive, sagging hat, its brim drooping like damp cloth, curving unnaturally downward, as though it dragged at the world around it. No face. Just a smear of nothing. A black void like a silhouette carved out of the night. I turned on instinct, flashlight raised, my other hand resting on my Glock in its holster. Olsen stepped back,
hand on his firearm, eyes scanning the dark. My beam cut through the fog,
illuminating nothing but air. I swept the sidewalk. The yards, nothing, just fog and silence. What'd you see? Olsen whispered. I don't know.
I thought I saw something behind us. Olsen shook his head and muttered. Great. First hour of shift.
And already it feels like it's downhill from here. I glanced at him and once more at the dark yard closest to me, the shadows pressing in on the edges of the light. Then I circled to the driver's side and got in, every sense telling me that whatever was there had not moved far. I pulled slowly onto the roadway, Olsen's cruiser falling in behind me. Emily sat buckled in the back, her face turned toward the window, eyes fixed on the fog outside like it was showing her something I couldn't see. That humming never stopped, soft, broken, drifting between notes with no rhythm, no melody, just fragments of a song she lived only a mile and a half away.
I knew the roads. I'd driven them hundreds of times.
But tonight they stretched like a maze, every block doubled, every turn too long. The silence inside the car pressed heavier with each street we passed. By the time her parents' home finally came into view, it felt like an hour had passed. The porch light was on. Her parents were outside, her mother hugging herself tightly, and her father was pacing back and forth. When our headlights hit the driveway,
Emily's parents came running. I opened the door,
unbuckled Emily, then stepped back to let her move forward. She walked on her own,
not robotic,
just distant, as if she wasn't fully awake. Her mother collapsed to her knees in the driveway, clutching Emily against her chest like she'd been drowning without her. Her father wrapped them both in his arms. The girl didn't cry, didn't hug back. She just stood there, arms at her sides, letting it happen. Olsen and I hung back by the cruisers, quiet. Then slowly we ushered them inside. We stepped in behind the family, careful not to track dirt across the floor. We stood off to the side, scanning the home as they settled into the living room. Emily sat on the couch between her parents, still silent. Still distant, the home was clean and modest. Beige carpet, soft lighting, a few old family photos lining the hallway. Nothing unusual. Then something shifted. She blinked, twice, and the weight in the room seemed to lift, just slightly. Her head tilted, her eyes refocused, and she yawned. Not a creepy, unnatural movement, just a normal, sleepy child's yawn. She rubbed her eyes and leaned into her mother, and just like that she looked like a 7-year-old girl again. Not the thing that had been out there in the fog. Olsen and I began a slow, methodical interview of the family and walkthrough of the home. We examined the front door. No tool marks, no damage. The lock was fully functional. We confirmed with both parents that it had been locked before they tucked her in. The father's hands still shook when he swore it. In Emily's room, everything was in place. No signs of struggle. Her window was locked from the inside. No prints on the sill. No scuffs on the frame. Her bed covers had been pushed back, like she'd simply stood up and walked out. Everything looked normal. But something in me stirred.
A pull, not fear, more like a whisper in the back of my mind that something hadn't revealed itself yet.
I've learned to trust that voice, so I stepped quietly out and walked back toward the living room, near the couch, and lowered my voice. "Mum, do you have crayons or markers? Some paper?"
She looked puzzled. I think so. Why?
"I'd like Emily to draw something for us. Just a picture. It's part of the investigation." The father stood, nodding. "Sure, I'll grab them." He returned a moment later with a small orange container of crayons and a stack of printer paper. I took one sheet and gently placed it on the coffee table, setting the crayons beside it. I knelt down and spoke softly to Emily. "I need your help."
I need you to draw a picture for me. She blinked at me, then looked at her mum. "It's all right," her mother said gently, placing a hand on her back.
Go ahead. I slid the paper a little closer. Can you draw Mr. Big Hat for me? Exactly how he looked. Emily nodded slowly and picked up a crayon without asking which color. She went straight for black. She started with the hat.
Not the figure, not the body.
Just the hat. She filled the page from edge to edge with it, an impossibly wide brim, lopsided and drooping at the ends. She dragged the crayon hard and slow, making thick, arcing smears. Jagged lines bled out from beneath the hat like dripping tar. Then she drew the face, or what should have been a face. A deep oval, black. So dark she tore the paper from pressing too hard. It wasn't a head, it wasn't eyes or a mouth, it was absence. She kept filling it in, round and round, blackening it over and over until the paper gave a soft, muffled rip at the center. No arms.
No legs, no body, just the hat and the thing beneath.
It that had no face at all. She slid the paper to me, without a word, and went back to leaning into her.
Mother's side, I stared at the
drawing for a long time. Olsen stepped behind.
Me, that's what you saw, isn't it? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. The hat drooping unnatural.
Sagging like it was too heavy for the world, and that black hollow where a face should be. I slipped the drawing into an evidence folder from my duty bag. We need to go back, I said. Olsen slowly nodded and said, Something's not right here. We returned to that stretch of road where I'd found Emily. The fog had thickened now, rising from the ground like steam from a grave, curling around streetlights and spilling into the corners of the yards. The silence pressed in, heavier than before, and even our radios seemed to have gone quiet. Then Olsen stopped dead in his tracks and pointed to the ground, saying, Look. I crouched down as the fog coiled around me. 2 sets of footprints were etched into the dirt. One was small, delicate, the unmistakable impression of a barefoot child, every fragile toe and arch perfectly defined. Right beside it, another set, larger, deeper, heavy, no tread, no drag marks, no shifting of weight, just smooth, solid prints spaced perfectly apart, leading away from the home in an almost deliberate rhythm. Emily hadn't run. She hadn't resisted. The larger figure had set the pace, and she had followed, step for step, as if tethered by something unseen. We photographed the prints, measured them, compared them, but neither of us spoke. The fog curled higher, wrapping around our ankles, whispering in the silence. My stomach knotted. Every instinct screamed the truth. This thing had walked with her, guiding her through the dark. Olsen exhaled slowly. She wasn't alone, he said. We stayed crouched over the impossible footprints for a moment longer, letting the chills seep through our coats and into our bones. Finally, we stood, returned to the cruisers, and cleared the scene. Back at the office, we wrote up our reports. I included everything, the unnatural silence, the way she moved, the footprints, the reflection. I don't know what Mr. Big Hat is.
I don't know where he comes from.
I don't know why Emily went with him, or what would have happened if I'd been a few minutes later. But I know what I saw. A child walking barefoot through the dark, holding a hand that wasn't there, a voice that didn't sound right, a shape in the reflection of my cruiser that shouldn't exist, and footprints. Real, clear, impossible, they're still in evidence. So is the drawing. Black crayon dragged hard across the page to shape the sagging brim of a wide hat, and a dark, inky smear where the face should have been. If a door opens by itself in the night, just a few inches, just enough for a child to slip through, be warned.
Don't assume it was the wind.
Don't assume it was a mistake, because there are things in this world that aren't supposed to exist. Things that move with quiet certainty. Things that take the shape of shadows, of hats, of absence. And sometimes they wait, patient, silent, for the moment you aren't looking.
Next story. The thing on the farm is getting closer. Hey, darkness, it's me. Again, EL, you probably remember from the other post about the thing on our farm. Well, it's still here. And this time a lot closer and worse. I really want to forget all of this is even happening. This encounter happened a few weeks ago, like 1 or 2. Now, let me start this by saying, no, we don't have a death wish. The farm still has to run. So meat, wool, and wheat is still supplied. And that means jobs have to be done. So my older brother Leo, yes, I know I used his real name, he says it's fine, and I had to go out to the north side of the farm, right in Fount, off one of the bigger reserves we had a 3-day job to do there. So me and my brother decided to take
The Unimog, which is a big retired army truck we own. We grabbed our swags, the throw 'em in the back, and grabbed a bag of food for the 2 nights and some snacks for the daytime. And for the first day, it was fine. We made good progress on our job and everything was fine except for the heat, but that's normal around here. When it got dark, right before the sun had fully set, we climbed into the back of the Unimog and pulled down the flap that was at the back so it was fully enclosed, and stated making dinner for the night, which happened to be 2 minuet noodles and beef jerky, and started playing Uno on the little pull-out table, like we often do, to pass time. Everything was normal, just like he have done this hundreds of times until... It wasn't at first, it was just a noise outside moving around and big. It was bog enough to snap some of the branches that were on the ground outside, and me and Leo imminently stopped playing and froze. Dead silent. My stomach dropped as we listened. To it get closer and closer until it was right outside. It was that close I could hear its breathing outside. Its breath was all wrong, like its throat hasn't been formed properly, and it struggled to breathe, and me and Leo looked at each other thinking,
the exact something. Why did it have to be that? Why did it have to be now? I could see the fear in Leo's eyes. We knew what this could do. We have seen it kill sheep, and not, it was right outside. And we were sitting ducks with only canvas protecting us. Then what made it so much worse? After a moment of it circling us, it stopped. Then we felt the weight of the Unimog shift towards the front, and one side, I looked and I saw it, one of its hand claw things, pushing into the canvas. I could see it.
I could make out each finger claw thing and how it looked like a human hand from the palm, but then its fingers stretched and sharpened into what looked like claws. It looked like it was using that hand claw thing to balance itself. Why, it must have been looking through the driver's window, and thank God we also closed that flap, because if we didn't, it would have seen us. I pushed harder, as if it was straining to look in better, and I was praying that the canvas didn't rip, because if it did, we would be screwed after what felt like an hour, but was only probably a minuet or 2. Its claw handting moved, and the Unimog's weight shifted back to how it dosed normally, but the thing wasn't gone. We could still hear it outside moving, circling. At one point it had its paws on the canvas again right behind Leo's head, and he looked like he was about to cry, because we knew that things wouldn't go well if it ripped eventually. After what felt like hours to left, there were no more. Footsteps circling, and the thing's breathing was gone, but we did not dare move, not for the rest of the night. We sat there in fear, just hoping that the thing didn't come back. Dawn eventually broke. Is getting earlier now that summer's coming.
And I'm so thankful it is. But even after first light, we didn't dare move, not until the sun was high in the sky, is when we hopped out and looked around, and there was little to no sag of it ever being there, except the few footprints that were there.
They were faint, but if you looked, you could see them, the hind prints of a big cat, and front ones were vaguely human, and that, ladies and gentlemen, was the latest encounter we had with the thing. Next story. The trip. Hello, it's me again. It's Noe. It's been some time since I last posted, and I apologize. But we moved from the nightmare that we had the misfortune of having to call our home. One of my brothers got married. I started school at the new town, ECT. I found new friends and everything was going good until we went on a trip. I'm now in a friend group of 8, if you include me. 6 guys, my best friend Elle, and me. I told them that my family was planning a trip to the Alps and offered to take them with, if they wanted. Elle isn't a friend of hiking, so she declined, same for 2 of the guys, who either had something planned or hated hiking the same lot as Elle. For as the remaining 4, which I'll call M, T, O, and D, I called my parents and told them that they'd be coming along, and they were happy that they didn't have to deal with me. My brothers wouldn't come, they're lazy, so I wasn't surprised. We drove in a van, which isn't comfortable when you're squashed between someone who takes up a ton of space and uses its "'cause I'm tall" as an excuse and a snoring Russian, while the other 2 are arguing in loud Turkish in the last row. I survived. The drive and the house that we were staying at was owned by a family member. Every one of us younger kids had their own room, while my parents shared one. It was cold in the night, so everyone but O was wearing long clothes. I know it's a stereotype that Russians aren't cold most of the times, but it's true for him. My parents were away and getting food, so we were bored. M, who is always planning something so stupid you can only watch, got up and said, "Guys, what if I whistle?" T was half asleep and answered, voice even deeper than usual, "I've seen you come to school in a dinosaur costume, and yet this is your worst idea." "I agree," D chimed in. "You'll attract something you don't want to." M chuckled. "Like what? That weird girl that doesn't leave me alone?" D got serious. "M, stop, it's not funny. You're actually going to get hurt." M still didn't listen. "It's not real, D. Stop being gullible." And out he went. Next thing we hear is whistling from him. I knew it was stupid. So did everyone but M, apparently. He came back in and just stood there, looking out the window for a minute. Then he turned to us and cockily said, "See? Nothing happened, you're all paranoid. And to be fair, nothing happened until we all went to bed." I was sleeping but woke up to knocking on my door. I groggily rolled over and grabbed my glasses. "Yeah?" I called out. The door opened to reveal D standing there, looking terrified. He came in, closed the door, and sat down on my bed. His eyes were wide, his curls messy like he'd been rolling over non-stop. He was shaking, and I was wondering what got this 6'4", very lean Turkish guy shaking like a 5-year-old after a Halloween movie.
"Is everything okay?" I asked, sitting up. He took a deep breath and recounted the last hours. "So, I was in bed and texting M, but I heard knocking at my window. It's facing out front, you know, where M whistled." I nodded. He continued. I heard his voice outside. It was telling me to come outside and that he's hurt because he was hunting a deer and it attacked him."
"But I know he wouldn't do that. He hates hunting. He's way too impatient for that," I replied. "So, what did you do then?" He flopped onto my bed so hard he bounced back. I looked outside, but it was nothing there. Now I'm scared." "That's fine. Everyone's scared." I smiled, trying my best to reassure him. He looked at me and asked, "Can I sleep here?" "Sure, if that helps," I said. But suddenly we heard a bang outside, like something hitting a tree. D shot up faster than I've ever seen him move before. "What the F was that?" he cursed. I didn't
even get to answer before the voice called from outside. "Hey, Fen? D? Can you hear me? I'm hurt! Help me, please!" It was M's voice, but he sounded
wrong. He has a slight Turkish accent, just like D, but this voice didn't. It spoke distorted and sounded neutral, not like someone in pain. The voice called out a second time, this time sounding more mad. "Fen, D, come outside, now." Me and D looked at each other in pure horror.
What do we do?" I whisper yelled. I saw D processing, and he got up and went to the door. Come on, let's go to the living room. We can see every door from there. I didn't even question him, just followed. Guess who I saw sitting there? M shaking in his Santa socks.
He jumped when he saw D's shadow. He heard the same thing, but in T's voice. "Em, I'm hurt. Please, help me," in the same distorted, accentless voice. And before long, O and T also showed up, because they heard voices too. T heard O, O heard D. "This is all your fault, M," O said. "You should never have whistled. What if someone went outside to whatever the hell that is?" T replied. "To be fair, I only knew it wasn't O because the thick Russian accent wasn't there." We chuckled, only to be shut up by something flying against the door so heavily it shook.
Hard. M physically jumped to hide behind O. The noise was so loud it awakened my parents, who are hard sleepers. You couldn't wake them up during a nuclear apocalypse, to be honest. But no, my dad ran out, followed by my mother. I've never seen my father look so scared.
Hez 6'5" and built like a fridge. It was silent, and we looked at each other while the air was thick with confusion and fear. My dad started, "You boys come with me." Slowly. The guys got up and followed my dad to the front door. They wanted to open the door, but no one wanted to make the first step. T obliged, cracked the door open and closed it again after not even a second. He took a deep breath. "There's a dead deer outside."
I mean, it's literally torn, shreds, like what we do to homework, he described, trying his best not to sound frantic.
My dad rubbed his forehead and sighed. "Right, so how about we just go back to bed?"
And settle this tomorrow. My mom, who had not said anything before, cut him off. Are you insane? What if whatever did that comes back?
So they sent the guys and me to O's room.
O took the bed, I was on the floor, and the other three sprawled everywhere.
It was tense.
No one spoke. I don't remember what happened until like 6 a.m. when we went back into the living room.
My parents were still sitting there, looking like they'd been on edge for the past 12 days, which is probably how long it felt. All of us knew what we had to do, so T opened the front door again.
And like he said, there was the deer lying on the front porch of our cabin.
And when he said that it was in shreds, he was not joking. But the weird thing was that there was no blood. Like zero. M and D had to look away and whispered in Turkish.
If I'm being honest, it sounded a lot like praying. I can't blame them. I prayed too after we got home.
My dad grabbed O, and together they dragged the deer back a little into the forest and came back inside. Usually we would have stayed another 3 days, but we went home then. No one spoke on the drive home. Probably because the guys were asleep, I was being crushed. Because 2 fell on me while asleep, but also slept then. When the others asked how the trip was, we just said, "Oh, it was great." We left because M wasn't feeling well. It's a lie, but easier to explain. "Oh, it's just cause M summoned something by whistling, and we didn't want to get turned into pulled pork." We don't know what that was, but it sure wasn't any of us, and we're just happy we didn't go outside. And yes, O is still kind of pissed off at M for obvious reasons.
But there's another trip coming up, so we'll see how that goes. Until then, please pray that it'll go normal.
Or don't, it's up to you. But stay safe. Thanks for listening to my story.